Now it's time to give you more hints about tomorrow's. Okay. Now, as we have some people leaving the class, now it's time to give more hints about tomorrow's quiz. Okay? I will do that in the course of this course. Okay. So this is actually, these are the main three purposes that we are going to utilize. But of course, there are more reasons. Okay, let me go to my spot.
Bir adım daha gerideydi, oradan atıyor.
Okay. Can you hear me? Okay, this is one way of dealing with it. That's what they told me, actually. I forgot to apply that. This is difficult, but I will be cramped at the end of the lecture. Okay. These are the other reasons that Ben talks about. For example, to make budget, to motivate people. You motivate people by saying that if you increase this number by this while you are working, I will be very happy, something like that, or I will give you a kiss or so, whatever. And for promotion, actually, it's basically what you do. If you are really successful, it might be a good deal, a good way of promoting. Celebrate means that you are giving a prize to somebody, or you are going to honor somebody publicly. For example, you are saying that you are doing a very good job. These are the purposes of measuring, and you're going to see that industrial engineers may be doing any one of these type of measurement in the work that they are doing. But most of the time, we're going to use actually the reasons that I covered in the previous page. Of course, the last one is interesting. Okay, the last one is interesting. I need to go here for one reason or another. Okay. Okay. Okay, so the last one is interesting. To get experience, you also do this type of measurements. Okay? And you're going to see that in your first year of real life job, this is what you would be doing a lot. Okay? You're going to measure certain things and see whether it is relevant with what you are thinking and so on and so forth. This would be very important. Okay. So I think I'm going to get rid of that. This is enough, actually. Okay. Yours is on, am I right? No, it's not on anymore. Let me put it back. It's very tiring, actually, to try to talk to something that makes horrible noise. Okay. Yeah. Okay, so now let's talk about let's relate some of our previous examples to the type of measurements that we have. For example, do you think that Tosh Kaizen example, let's think about the Tosh Kaizen example. What is the performance measure that we use was time? Do you think that it was to control, to improve? Which one do you think is more appropriate? Improve is much more appropriate, but at the same time, you can see that the way that he approaches when he is describing the situation is he wants to control that time. So basically, he wants to make sure that it is under a certain time limit that he has in his mind. But then he says that this is too long, it's not acceptable, and then he improves it. So you can see that most of the reasons that we are going to have a lot of overlaps. So it's not very clear. That's the reason why we call it art rather than an exact science with respect to what we are doing. Because you have to understand which fits the purpose and so on yourself. And the way that you approach the problem, you have to understand what you are really looking for. Now, airport operations. Now, any performance measures that you remember from the airport operations examples? Anybody? Time. Time is the main one that we spent. The total time that the plane spent in the gate was our primary concern. Now, what is the purpose of this measurement? Improve. Well, in what sense? If we have it less, it will be much better. Okay, control. Do you think that we need to have it for control as well? Yes, because the airlines actually are buying the time of the gate. So you tell the airport operation or airport organization that my planes are going to stay, this plane is going to stay for an hour and a half. And they allocate the time accordingly. You pay some money for that time, of course, but if you go beyond that time, you are going to be penalized. So you do that for control purposes as well. In other words, you measure the total time and make sure that it is within the limits, within the boundaries, which is acceptable. Now, routing through networks. This is basically, if you remember the example, this is the shortest path example. So why do we do that? Do we do that for evaluate, to improve? Well, improve is not something that we are going to do because basically we know that we are solving it optimally. So that's the best way to go from one node to the other. So we probably want to find out those times. So that's sort of an evaluation rather than improvement because it's not going to be improved. We know that. Okay? So I can simply continue, but I think these examples will be certain examples that you already are familiar with. So you can use these examples to consider, for example, performance measures, what kind of performance measures, whether it is for effectiveness or for efficiency, and what is the relation, what is the purpose of using that kind of a measurement. You can actually create some examples by yourself, and you can study it that way as well. Looking at the problem, for example, the solid waste problem. Okay? So I think this is the best way to study this topic, because otherwise it will be difficult. Now, what I would also recommend you is to read the articles that are associated with this, because they are also going to give you a framework which is going to make a lot of sense together with my lecture, which is going to be a complement, and you will be able to figure out what we mean by that. Now, we are living through with our experience, actually, we know that we need performance measures in this classroom. But reading those, you're going to learn that there is a theory behind that as well. Okay. So now let's come to the individual measures. Now, up to this point, we emphasized type of measurement, why are we measuring, and some definitions. Now, what are the individual measures to be used? Now, we already are familiar with some measures like time and so on, but are they appropriate for every case? Are they appropriate for a given case, let's say for Kızılay, for organizations like Kızılay? Do we always use the same measures? The answer is no. There might be some other organizations like Kızılay which might have different purposes. So the measures that you are going to use for performance might be different. Might be similar, different, or might be completely different. Okay, because it depends on the situation. Now, in general, of course, the number of things that you can pick up is limited in number. The only thing that you should be careful is while selecting any measure, you have to make sure that it is something which is the result of your decision or your design. In other words, you cannot select a decision variable
as a performance measure at the same time. Because if it is something that you can decide, it cannot be a performance measure. A performance measure is something that will be the consequence of your decision or your design in general. Okay? This is important. For example, you cannot say that I am going to have 5 different lines in the cafeteria. My performance measure is the number of lines that I have in cafeteria. That cannot be a performance measure. Why? Because that's basically a decision variable, but a performance measure will be something which is going to be a consequence of that 5 lines that you specify. So there is a, this is what you should realize and understand. So we usually have, for different topics, you may be able to find in some references a list of possible performance measures. These are not always going to be helpful, but it will be helpful under certain circumstances. So, but it is very useful to know them, that they exist. Okay? So, for example, if you read one of the assigned papers, you're going to see that there is a set of performance measures which are defined for some kind of a manufacturing environment. Okay? So it is useful to know that. But you may want to select something which is different, of course. In every individual case, to set what you want to measure, rather than looking from a list, to identify what your need is to measure is more important. Okay? So this is basically what you should be doing in general. Now, I will give an example of a composite index which is used to give a price of quality. You may have heard about that for several years. I think the Turkish Businessmen Association, TÜSİAD, and together with Quality Association, Kalite Derneği, is giving a prize which is called the Quality Prize. And we also have the European counterpart of that quality prize. Sometimes you see ads in the newspapers, and some firms say that we got the European Quality Prize. For example, Arçelik in Istanbul got it a couple of times, Beko got it once, and so on and so forth. So this is basically a prize which is given for the overall quality of the products that you are manufacturing. Now, this doesn't necessarily mean that individual product that you buy from that institution is going to work perfectly. No, there might be some mistakes. But these prizes are given to systems in general, and it gives to the potential of the system that will generate products that will be very good. Similar to that, for example, our IE department has an accreditation by an international organization, which says that we are doing very good with respect to the teaching processes that we have in this department and at the university. But it doesn't necessarily tell a lot about each individual. Okay? You might be a very successful individual with respect to the coursework that you have here, or you might be a very less successful person, but it doesn't necessarily mean that you have all the quality standards that we are looking in general for the system. But it simply tells you that the system that we are giving that prize is capable of creating or managing, come up with products that will have this value. Okay? So it's the same thing. So this award is called usually Baldrige Award, although we tend to call it Quality Award, but it is named after a guy who is called Baldrige. And the idea here is very simple. Almost all the aspect of an organization is measured, and it is brought together in a certain logic. So let's look at that. These are the possible different components that are used in the Baldrige Award. Now let's look at this carefully. Okay. Now the statements in italics are showing a certain group. So for example, we first have the human resource utilization group. So in our organization, if you really want to have this quality award, you have to make sure that human resources that you have in that organization is utilized appropriately. It does not necessarily mean that they are 100% utilized. No. It's utilized appropriately means that you are going to look for the possibilities of problems that may come up with those humans. And if your system is capable of solving the problems, then you have a high grade in certain parts of it. Now, so this is the title of a certain performance measure, human resource utilization. And it is given some points, 150 points. Now, how do we form those points? This is human resource management. These are the sub-level performance measures for each of them. Employee involvement, quality education and training, employee recognition and performance measurement, employee well-being and morale. So if you add up all these 5, you're going to obtain 150. Now, how do we measure each of them? It turns out that the experts who will visit the organization will measure those according to certain certified issues that they look at it. For example, they go to a company and check the employee involvement. There are 2 aspects of it. What do we have as employee involvement in the historical background of the company? So are there any evidences that shows employee involvement in the operations other than routinely doing their job and leaving? Remember the Mini Cooper example. They were forming groups and trying to solve problems. Okay? And so what they are doing is they look at the history and they look at the way that they express themselves in the report that they give to these peer review people or to this jury. And then the grades are given accordingly. So this is a certain way that this whole thing becomes meaningful. Now, another set is, for example, quality results. This is basically about the products and service. So you have millions of things which are listed there, and I can assure you that for this one, I can create, for this product and service quality results, I can create some titles that will go underneath that. So you can see that usually in real life, when you are talking about performance measure, you're talking about a hierarchy of measures coming up together. On the other hand, what did we do in our optimization model? We took one of them, okay? We optimized that. But you can see that to optimize only using one of them, in general, will not be sufficient. However, it is going to be extremely important that you know how to do that. Otherwise, the things that you can do will be very, very limited. Okay, so this is actually a problem. This is not very simple. Believe me, I mean, people have been working on these type of issues for 100 years almost. And this is how they come up with some kind of a structure. Now, of course, in the systems that we will be dealing as engineers, we will be dealing parts of the system. So we will have less complication, but still it is going to be a complicated system. So this is something that you might need to remember when we are going to have discussion next week about multi-objective decision making. What happens if you have more than one performance measures that you need to check when you are making a decision? And we're going to solve your problem of selecting the department or selecting the university problem. How can a person select his or her university to study? Okay? So this is not a problem that you're going to minimize your time or something, but This is how we're going to approach that problem, and it's part of industrial engineering, of course. We need to learn those type of things as well. Okay. Now, another thing which is very important is the way that we look at the problem. Now, I am going to talk about the traffic problem. I probably gave this example. Did I give it the traffic example? Very shortly. Maybe I gave it in a few minutes. But let's say that we are going to deal with the traffic issue. Let's say that I am in the shoes of Melih Gökçek, and, the mayor of Ankara, and I want to solve the traffic problem of Ankara. Now, first of all, let's understand what we mean by the traffic problem. Now, of course, the traffic issue has a large number of different views. First view is, I am a simple passenger waiting for the bus. The traffic means that I am waiting there, just in the bus stop, without going. I don't care whether I go, I sit down, or I stand up while I am in the bus. I am simply waiting in the bus stop, and I hate that. Okay? You probably 99% of you hate some kind of waiting. Okay? So I am only concerned about that. So traffic problem for me as a customer is the time that I wait in the bus stop. Okay, the time that I spend in the traffic is also a problem. But at least I am in more comfortable situation instead of waiting in the bus stop. Okay, you never know. Some buses are very crowded, of course. You might prefer waiting in the bus stop rather than going into the bus. Okay, so this is basically my view of the traffic. Now, another view is, let's take the bus driver. Now, bus driver, they are horrible in these days. Why? Because there is always a traffic jam somewhere. So they want to make sure that they can drive safely. Well, I am, of course, guessing this, and I am very optimistic. So the way that I describe it, by the way, this is parentheses, I'm opening a parenthesis. Bus driver's job is to take the bus from one point to the next. He doesn't care whether there are customers inside or not. Okay? So his duty is to take the bus from one point to the other as fast as possible. Okay? And whether the customers are waiting in the, he misses a certain bus stop and so on, is not his concern. Okay? Well, let's be more optimistic and say that the objective of the bus driver is to make sure that he drives the bus safely, he serves the customers in a reasonable way, he approaches to the bus stop in the regular way so that there will be no danger with respect to getting into a bus or getting out of the bus, so on. So if I view the traffic problem with respect to the bus driver, then I will be complaining about the time that I spent in the traffic, of course, but that's secondary. I will probably complain about the cars which are parking in the bus stop. I will probably complain about the passengers who are trying to not to pay anything. I will complain about the passengers who is harassing the driver because they don't know where to go. Okay, I mean, we all have seen examples of this. So there are the concerns of the bus driver is not similar to the passenger. It's the same traffic problem. It's a huge problem, actually. The third view. Now, I am running the organization of the municipality. So I am running buses, subway, and so on. I want to make sure that I have enough going everywhere. So my planning problem is much more difficult than these individuals. However, I should always remember that I am serving these individuals. I am doing it for those individuals, actually. That's my role. So if I don't think about the passengers or bus drivers, if I only talk about, well, the number of buses that we have in Ankara is 3,000 and most of them are new, I know, but that's not the issue. So the issue is not to increase the number of buses. The issue is to make sure that the buses are effectively used to serve the customers and to avoid problems that will be created to the drivers. They are also part of the problem. Okay? Of course, we also have the efficiency issue. I shouldn't be running a lot of buses because I may be out of budget soon if I run more buses than I should. Fourth view, environmental agency. We don't have anything like that in Turkey, but we have our environmental. The role of environmental agency in Turkey is to make sure that all the areas that are left for environmental protection can, in the future, can be used for some kind of a construction. This is the way that it's going in these days. But environmental issues is very important. We are talking about city traffic in a given city where population is very dense. Okay, so we have a lot of people per meter square in Ankara. So you have to make sure that certain carbon emission or other things that will pollute the air will create a problem for the city of Ankara. So the concern is completely different, but it's definitely related with the traffic. Am I right? Mostly with the traffic. So you can see that actually just talking about a certain problem is not sufficient. This might give you an understanding on how to write the term paper. Remember, you gave me some proposal saying that I'm going to deal with the traffic problem. Okay? I don't know whether anybody gave the traffic problem yet. I already read half of them, but there was no traffic problem. I'm reading it in a certain grouped way, actually. So basically, if you write traffic problem, that wouldn't mean anything. Why? Because I want to understand what are the views that you are taking. Are you talking about, usually you talk about the third view. Usually. Okay, when you talk about the traffic problem. But you might take different views. So you can understand that when you are analyzing a problem, it becomes extremely important to know what you really want to achieve. Of course, for each of them, the performance measures that you are going to select will be different. You can see that now. Okay? Now, the Environmental Protection Agency or agency is not going to be interested in the waiting time of a customer. Okay? Now, with different forces controlling different parts, we're going to have the traffic system running. Probably, I won't be able to see that. But this is the way that it should be planned. Okay. I don't be able to see that means that I won't be able to live long enough to see that. You may be able to see that. Okay. If you do it properly, of course. Okay, any questions on this? Now, this is very important to understand. Remember, sometimes I talk about the same problem and emphasize you have to know who you are solving the problem for. Okay? You have to know the owner of the problem. Who owns this problem that you are going to solve? Are we talking about the environmental agency? Are we talking about municipality? Are we talking about the association for bus drivers? Okay? So the performance measures that you are going to use is going to be different. I'm not saying that you have to disregard the other views, but at least the performance measure should reflect the view that you are taking. So you can see that modeling in that respect is not straightforward. In other words, there is no single model of traffic. It depends on who you are solving the problem for. It depends on the view that you are taking when you are solving that problem. These are crucial when you are doing applications. Now, of course, at the university, we are going to give you some examples, but we cannot cover all possible examples. So what we are going to do is we are going to probably offer you courses which is going to build up your background to solve problems, number one, and courses which will give you background to formulate problems, to model problems. The rest is when you are doing, the rest is on you and when you are doing the applications. Okay, questions? Okay, I am aware that today's lecture is very like monologue. I am talking all the time, and there is less possibility for participation. But I think this is the only one. We may have one more like this by the end of in probably 2 or 3 weeks. But the rest will be actually with more interaction, like movies and like clips and so on. But these are the things that I need to cover, unfortunately. Okay. For example, in nearly 2005, this is also another perspective. Now, if you look at these 2 papers, these are the papers that I want you to read carefully. The second paper uses a public administration perspective. It's basically service type of paper. The first one takes a manufacturing perspective. In other words, although we have manufacturing, service, and so on, most of the concepts are very similar. And in this department, this is probably unique for the, well, we are one of the IE departments which do not consider the differences in between manufacturing or service, but we try to combine them and teach you how to approach to solve problems rather than being confined to manufacturing or service. So we try to do it together in this department. There are certain IE departments who would separate those and deal with one of them or with both of them, but in a separate way. Fortunately, we have courses that are specifically for one type of a system, but they are all electives. The required courses are going to treat all of them together, except, of course, manufacturing processes course. Okay, you need to have that. Okay. Slightly different language. You're going to see that they have slightly different language, but they talk about exactly the same thing. 2 completely different perspectives. Okay. Now, let's come to the last issue that I want to consider for today's lecture. Now, we are aware that we need to measure the performance. We are aware that we have to create individual measures so that we can either optimize them or use them for different purposes. Now, question is, physically, how are we going to do the measurement? Okay? Now, when I was talking about the Baldrige Award, I said that expert panels are going to organizations and making that measurements according to certain rules. However, this is a very expensive way of dealing with the problem. We need to be able to do the measurement within the organization. Otherwise, everything is going to be exposed. Okay. Now, measurement is, first of all, we have to understand that measurement is quantitative. Quantitative in the sense that there is always either some kind of a grouping, or it is a certain number, or it is a certain assignment of a rank. Okay, 1, 2, 3, 4, or it's group A, group B, group C, or a number. That's what we mean by measurement. Now, usually what we do is we decompose the measurement into smaller parts and do it independently. And the aim that we have in decomposing the measurement is to make sure that the uncertainty is affecting our values as little as possible. Now, let me explain what this means. During the break, I was talking with some of your friends. A friend told me that, one of your friends told me that one of the measures that we should use for the blood example is the number of patients that a nurse sees per day. I think this is a very good measure, am I right? So the number of, because basically we will be able to understand the efficiency of the nurse using this kind of a measure as well. Now, this is very reasonable. Of course, but which day are we going to take the measurement? Okay, for example, if we take the measurement today, okay, it might be a very meaningful measurement because it's sunny and people are outside. So we have a lot of people. If we had a truck of Kızılay somewhere in the campus today, we would have a lot of people visiting it because people are outside. Now, however, if it was snowing, then we wouldn't have anybody outside. So there is a certain chance, which we call uncertainty, that will affect the quality of our observation. So given this, what should we do? Okay, so this is the reason why we have a topic called how to measure. It's not that simple. So traffic, for example, it's another thing. Let's say that we are going to find out the time that it takes to go from Bilkent campus to Sıhhiye at 5:30 bus, with 5:40 bus every day, like on Monday. Well, you're going to see that if you are going, for example, to Sıhhiye, each day is a different story. Mondays are different, Tuesdays are different. If it rains, it will be different. If we have the Prime Minister passing from those roads twice, it will be different, which he passes all the time. He's not in Ankara in these days, so the traffic is very good. Okay? Well, at least we can say that. Okay? Now, I'm not against the government, by the way. Just traffic. Traffic is very good. Okay, so this is actually one thing. Okay, so you can see that if you observe in a certain day where we have a group of foreign prime ministers coming to Ankara, or those of you who are in Ankara would know that the Pope was in Ankara 3 years ago. Papa. Okay, you remember that day, those who were in Ankara? Well, we cannot forget that day because nothing moved. If you take your observation that day, you die, actually. So it means that we shouldn't rely on a single observation. So there is a science underneath all of these, all this issue that I'm talking about. And that science is called statistics. Okay, so we should know a lot of things about statistics if we are going to measure something. Of course, what are the tools of measurement? So let's look at the tools. One of them is use of an instrument versus manual recording. If you are recording time, you can use a stopwatch, or you can manually record the time. Or you can use simply a device to do that. You're going to learn these in 271, actually. Another way of is use of observation, sampling. You sample the days, you sample the times, and find out the times. And this is basically statistics. Or you use models. Okay? For example, I may devise a certain model that you still don't know how to devise that. You haven't seen that model. But I can use a certain model, and I can create artificially very hard traffic conditions if I have that model available. And then using that model artificially, I can measure the time that it takes to go from Bilkent to Sıhhiye at certain odd times of the year. Like when it snows, when we have the Prime Minister passing from the roads twice, when we have also Abdullah Gül passing for once, and when we have construction, and when I can create this type of a model, actually. The name of that type of a model is called simulation. We're gonna talk about that. But if I can prepare that kind of model, I can use those models to give me some observations. Now, be careful, I said observations. So the model is not going to give me a single number. I can only obtain observations from the models, from those type of models. So this is basically how operations research can be used to give you the observations that you are looking for. Okay? So this is another thing that we're going to use, and these are the tools that we have for measurement. Any questions on this? Okay. Now, always remember that you are probably not the first person to measure that. Okay, in other words, somebody crazy may have the time that it takes to go from Bilkent to Sıhhiye every day might be recorded somewhere. Do you think that the bus service at Bilkent is recording those times? Huh? They might. Well, they used to, but they are not anymore. But if you are a service, for example, especially if you are carrying primary school kids, they always write the times. So you might have those records somewhere that you can use. So data is not always something that you're going to find out by observation. It might be available. You need to consider the error in measurement if the data is already available to you. You have to investigate whether there is any error in measuring. For example, they are doing public polls for the coming elections. Okay? Now, we are not hearing about the polls, am I right, anymore? Because I think the newspapers and the TVs are not allowed to announce them, or I don't know why we're not hearing about them. But of course, even if you hear about them, you wouldn't believe in that because each of them has different types of measurement errors. They are doing sampling. So unless you have some solid numbers associated with that sampling, you shouldn't be believing in any one of those. Of course, what you do is you believe in the ones that were quite close in the previous years because they know how to handle that sampling problem. But this is something that we are going to need, we will need to do. And of course, we have to relate the available information while measuring the new ones as well. And this is a little bit hard to understand, but you might have some kind of a historical data which is coming from the conditions of that day, of that year, which is last year. Now, this year you have different conditions. You have your new observations, but you can utilize the previous year's data by making some transformations. Okay? Hopefully, if you take a course on data analysis, which will be probably a course that will follow statistics, and it's an elective course, you will learn more details of how doing those type of things. But in standard statistics, you're going to learn how to analyze data, how to do sampling, and so on. Now, this book is very interesting. It's actually a hilarious book. There are a number of different things that you will be amused at. How to measure anything, finding the value of intangibles in business. It's not something that is required for the course, of course, but you may want to read that. It's very nice and easy to read. I don't think that it's even at the reserve. It's just in the library. So if you are interested, you can read it. Okay, or you can just skim through it. Now, this is the example that we're going to deal with that in sections before the quiz. Okay, so we're going to spend an hour on this and in some other things before we go to the second hour and take the quiz. Okay, but this will be the example that we will deal with tomorrow. And I will distribute what the example is to you tonight after I get to the office. And next one is the reading associated with today's course is the first one, the first two are compulsory reading. The second are, the last two are optional. Somehow it is an advanced reading requirement. But especially this one is interesting because it has the format, partially it has the format of the term paper that I want you to write. It has its glossary in the beginning, but I want it at the back. But it is written in that respect. It is written as a chapter in an encyclopedia. So I think you may want to look at it. It's available at the web. And the next one is, we're done. Any questions? I'll see you tomorrow. And on Friday. Tabii.